thank you everybody for joining. Looks like we have a pretty tight group tonight, so perhaps we can have a bit more of an informal conversation. My name is Doug Sartori, and I am the principal consultant at Parallel 42, and who worked on this project. And I am also the lead for Border City Data, which is the Hackforge interest group who is sponsoring this event. Border City Data is an interest group composed of folks who are interested in data, working with data, and every month we meet here at Hackforge to talk about techniques and tools and things that we do as data practitioners. It's a ton of fun. And if this is your first BCD event, although I see that it is not, I can see the attendance list. If this is your first BCD event, I hope that we see you at more. And Windsor Hackforge is the organization that puts these events on, sponsoring not only Border City Data, but a host of other interest groups at Hackforge. And I encourage you to check out the website at hackf.org and get involved. If you're interested in being part of this little community, now is a great time to get involved because we are just over a month away from our annual general meeting. And the way that you become a member of Hackforge and therefore have standing to participate at our annual general meeting is through volunteering, like Haley, Dana, and I are doing tonight, and sharing your time with the community. That's how you become a member of Hackforge. And I strongly encourage you to get involved. And I want to just take a moment to give Dana Teagle and Haley Tibbetts an opportunity to say hello and introduce themselves. They're on the call here. Dana and Haley were our developers on this project, on the Queer Walk project. Do you folks want to maybe take a moment to introduce yourselves and say hello? Dana, start.
Hey, yeah, no problem. I'm Dana Teagle. I've been working within web and software development for a few years now, but I also did a boot camp in web development last year, which is kind of like been this next big step of my career journey. And this project was a fantastic opportunity for me to work on as well. I'm, as well as being a software developer, I'm also a trans woman, and the queer and trans community are really important to me, and I think inform my work in some way. So to be able to work on a project like this that really was to do with the intersection between trans and queer kind of activism and advocacy, and then also software development was a really cool opportunity. And I'm really thankful that I was able to work with Doug and Haley and Hackforge and P42 on this project, because it's really been a fantastic time. Yeah. Haley, over to you.
Haley, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm Haley. I'm a film expat turned front-end developer with a passion for kind of using tech, similarly to kind of what Dana was talking about, to use that platform, use tech to kind of create space for queer and neurodivergent people. So yeah, working on this project, it was a really great way to get that advocacy and get that work under my belt as well. Same kind of deal. I did boot camp last year, moving into this year, working a little bit more steadily with front end development, and then seeing where that takes me. I'm really glad to kind of be able to be here talking about the project.
Awesome, thank you. And just quickly, I will mention two other members of the project team who are not able to make it tonight. One being Randy Topliff, who was the original author of the McDougall Tour application, as well as Kenya Tomei, who was our project manager and held the whole thing together. Welcome. And we've got a participant in person. Welcome. Okay, so we've got a few people on the call. And we're just about to, and you have the pleasure of seeing my agenda here as well. Welcome and thank you for joining us. And we're just about to get into a little bit of background on this project. So The original impetus for this work was the McDougall Corridor project, which was a initiative that we worked on last year, funded by the Canadian Urban Institute, and we worked with our partners, the Essex County Black Historical Society, the the Center for Cities, the Windsor Law Center for Cities, and Letty Library. They funded us to create the McDougall Tour, which is a very similar application, taking a look at the McDougall Corridor in Windsor, which is an important area and neighborhood for the Black community, especially in the 20th century. That was just a fantastic project for us. We knew that this application was going to be something that had the potential for broader application than just the McDougall Corridor Tour. So when we wrote that grant, we explicitly requested that we be able to open source the application, that we would be able to dedicate the code for the McDougall Tour to the Commons. The Canadian Urban Institute were on board. They were excited about that. They supported our vision. So we released Pytheas, which is the overarching name of the project. And Pytheas, for those who don't know, is an ancient Greek explorer. Pytheas was the first person from the Mediterranean to explore the British Isles and potentially the land of Thule, which we're not exactly sure where he went, but we're thinking it might be Iceland. So pretty neat person, and that's the name of our open source project. We quietly released that. It wasn't something that we wanted to make a big splash about, because we knew that Pytheas wasn't ready. We had built an application that was focused on delivering on the McDougall Tour experience, which was an experience that was 100% set up to support video. So at every stop on the tour, there is a YouTube video associated with that stop that tells the story of that particular location and its meaning and importance to the Black community in Windsor and beyond. That was great. That was a great application for that project. Because there were a whole host of people creating videos, among them the Essex County Black Historical Society and other contributors created all of those videos to support that project. But we knew that not every community out there that was interested in potentially publishing a digital tour was going to have that exact need. So we were really looking for some other opportunity to showcase Pytheas and to add the features that we felt that would be the minimum features that we felt would be needed to give it more broad application and to make it an open source application that really is something that folks who want to do a digital tour type of project can adopt. So with that as the background, enter Walter Cassidy. Walter Cassidy, last spring, very early in the spring, contacted me about his historical timeline of the queer community in Windsor, Essex. That is an asset that has existed for some time. It is on the Pride Fest website, and it's just a terrific historical document exploring the history of the community chronologically. Walter was looking for a map to go along with his historical timeline, and in true consultant fashion, I underpromised. I told Walter we probably would be able to find time to build a static map that he could share with folks when he was giving his bus tour, that, I like to underpromise when I can, because you make sure that you don't disappoint people. But in parallel to communicating that to Walter, I was furiously trying to figure out if we could do this and how we could do this. Windsor Hackforge was kind enough to pony up some resources. They donated some funding to help support the development of a Pytheas implementation for Walter's idea. And we went to our friends at Trans Wellness Ontario. Those folks were kind enough to support us by publishing a job post to the community that they serve, and to the broader queer community in Ontario. And that brought us the collaboration with Dana and Haley, which has turned out to be an absolute delight. And it was such a good experience. And when you work with early career developers, you truly never know what you're going to get. The professionalism and the expertise that Dana and Haley brought to this project was such a breath of fresh air, so refreshing. And we saw an opportunity, and Dana and Haley have joined other projects with Parallel 42 since then, and continue to work with us, which is awesome. So that's kind of the background and the history of this thing. And so what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Dana to talk a little bit about the application, provide a walkthrough. Dana, I understand that I'm going to need to share my screen. Is that right? Okay. I'm going to share my screen so that everyone can take a look at the tour itself. Okay, so here we go.
I think I'm going to likely start by talking about some of the various different technologies that go into building out the application. So I might not want you to necessarily be going through the site immediately, but I'll let you know when I'm ready for that.
You tell me when you're ready.
Thanks. So, hey everyone, thank you, Doug, for the intro on that. It's definitely been a fantastic experience, and I really loved working on this. To go through some of the tech that goes into it. First of all, the app is built as a React app. So React, for those who don't know, is kind of an open source JavaScript library originally developed by Meta that uses components to build out user interfaces. So Pytheas being built using functional components made the work that Haley and I were tasked with of developing this specific implementation for QueerWalk, I think, very streamlined, because the app was already structured in such a way that we only really had to kind of modify the elements that were different from the McDougall corridor. And it allowed us to structure the data in imported JSON files, meaning all of the stops and their descriptions are being dynamically rendered rather than repeating lines and lines of code and hard coding values into pages as you would in a more static site. The app was also written with TypeScript, which is a superset of JavaScript that requires static typing, or in other words, like for data types of variables to be declared and then evaluated throughout the application. So I really liked working with TypeScript on QueerWalk specifically, because with the size of Pytheas as it stood as an application to be going into, and all the various kind of moving pieces in it, I think TypeScript ensured that as we modified or added values, they weren't going to cause any issues on render. And it allowed us to identify, I think, a lot of potential bugs before they even actually materialized. So TypeScript was really helpful in that way. For styling, it used the emotion library, which assists with kind of the building of styled components within a React app. These are essentially functions that take care of any style specifications for the various parts of a page that you can then import into each component file and use to build out your functionality. Additionally, the app uses Jotai, which is a state management tool for React apps. Any of you who are like familiar with React development will be aware that state is kind of a huge part of the way that these apps are structured, essentially being any value that's internal to a component that may change, usually based on, I guess, like user interaction or input. And when changing, it usually causes a re-render of the app. So Jotai simplified a lot of that work going into building an application that uses state, because it stores all of your state variables within one file. It can run certain functions based on those states and then have them also reference and use one another's values in their individual functionality. And they can also work asynchronously, which was very beneficial. So this was my first proper time working on an application that used Jotai for state management, and I found it pretty easy to pick up and make modifications within as were necessary. But to go into kind of what made it actually a mapping and routing application, the app uses Leaflet. So that's another open source JavaScript library that allows for map visualization within the application. I don't know if, Doug, maybe you could screen share now and you could show us maybe one of the content pages that has one of the maps.
And I'm on the home page. I am going to choose the full tour, and here we are on the tour. Go ahead.
Nice. Thank you, Doug. So Leaflet is essentially a lightweight library that you can use with the React library to process the JSON and GeoJSON files. And we can feed it those files, and it takes care of most of the work of kind of rendering a map that has support in every desktop or mobile browser. I think with how ubiquitous kind of Google Maps is nowadays, most people have very strong expectations for how a map should move and function online. And so being able to use an open source technology that we can kind of bring in and utilize for our purpose that takes care of most of these kind of considerations is obviously like a really big help in building this sort of site. But then Leaflet didn't fully take care of kind of all of the routing requirements for an application like this. So for that, we used Open Route Service, which is like an open source API that computes those directions within the application, as you can see on Doug's screen now. So it really turns this into kind of a tour application rather than just a list of stops. It's able to do some of that work to analyze how you should move around that space. And then, Doug, if you wouldn't mind also now going to one of the content pages that have the images on it, then I could, talk about how we implemented something specific and new to this implementation. As Doug had mentioned, the McDougall corridor was set up to only take videos for every stop, using a component called React Player, where you can just kind of feed it a YouTube URL and then it would display on the page. But as we started to get into building out this application, it became very clear that we would have likely only a single image or multiple images, and that would also probably be a useful consideration for any future Pytheas implementations. So it was at that point that I recommended bringing in Pure React Carousel, which allowed for this kind of building out of a really simple kind of image carousel where you can move through it. You can click on a dot to bring it back to one, and just feed it kind of these images in a way that would allow it to dynamically render for every page, look very similar, and be styled very similarly to the rest of the app. And then also take care of some of the considerations that come with an image carousel, mainly kind of responsiveness onto a mobile browser and also accessibility for especially users who aren't using a mouse but are perhaps tabbing through with a keyboard. So using Pure React Carousel for that as well was really, really beneficial. In terms of kind of other parts of the application, I think that's most of the tech stack. But within this app, you can kind of, as Doug is hovering over there, you can mark certain stops as completed. You can, drag around, move through the map of it. It's fantastic to actually see it in motion right now. Because I'm based, I didn't mention this earlier, but because I'm based in Toronto, and the application does require you be within the bounds of the Windsor area to access the mapping application, I haven't spent a whole lot of time within the actual mapping of it, especially as we've gotten deeper and deeper into the work. So it's really cool to actually see it working. Yeah. Doug, would you mind just going back to some of the content pages and I just showing kind of one of those? Yeah. So perfect. So all of this data is kind of stored, and Haley, I think, will talk about this a little bit more thoroughly as they describe kind of the actual dev process that we went through. But most of this data is stored within JSON files, which we're able to hold all of our images, any alt text, the various descriptions, the location, the title, and import those through, as well as then be referenced in some of the specific tours that you could go through. I think that's another thing Haley will probably touch on further. But Doug, if you wouldn't mind going to the homepage, you can just show the drop down for the various tour types. So McDougall Corridor only had one standard tour, and because of the fantastic work that Walter did in putting this together, there are so many stops on this implementation. And so we had not only a full tour, but also a tour that was more accessible by specifically being able to walk in kind of ideally a day. And then also the guided bus tour, which Walter took people on Sunday, which as kind of a launch of Windsor Pride, which from my understanding, Doug was on and was a very fun time. I think that's most of probably what I wanted to go through. I think Haley might want to reference maybe the site screen share as well while they're talking, but yeah, I'll hand it over to you if that's okay.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, so that's pretty much the UI that we were kind of working with, and then as in terms of kind of the process that we went through when we were kind of trying to figure out what we're going to do to add on to what had already been done with the original Pytheas implementation. Yeah, kind of what Dana was saying, we knew that we were going to need to be able to add functionality to be able to display more than one tour, and then also the work that we did to kind of refactor some of the code that was already in place. So I think the most important part in kind of understanding how the app works is to kind of understand the data structure that's kind of underlying under the site. So we have like one big GeoJSON file, which is a file that kind of has all of the markers for the entire tour and all of the subsequent data that kind of relates to each location. So for each location, we have like a header image, we have the coordinates for each location, and then we have an ID that points to a JSON file that basically has all of the content details for each detail page. So this is the GeoJSON file that is kind of like the master list of like all of the markers that we have available. And then this is what's used to kind of display all of the markers on the mapping page. And that holds all of that kind of data that we need for that. And then those pieces of data in the GeoJSON file point to these specific JSON files that we have for each marker and for each location. So one of the things that we needed to do when we were figuring out how to kind of dynamically render this content onto each details page, because we wanted to think forward not only about this implementation, but we also wanted to be able to think about how future implementations are going to be able to use this data structure. We wanted to be able to offer people the option to have video displayed on the details page. We wanted to be able to show not one image, but a bunch of images if they so choose, because Walter kind of came to us and had a bunch of really great images for each details page. So we wanted to be able to use all of those. So in the original implementation with McDougall Corridor, the URL pointed to one kind of video file, and we kind of went in and broke that up into kind of an array of objects, and then each object would be representative of a different file. So we would have a path for each object, we would have what type we were dealing with. So we would be able to kind of specify if it's a video, if it's an image, and then we would be able to kind of be able to structure things that way so that there was a little bit more flexibility in the future in terms of what we would be able to display on those details pages, which was really nice. And then the other aspect that was kind of our big undertaking was the multiple tour types. So as it stood right now, we had a function that was fetching all of the markers that were to be displayed for our map. And what we needed to do is kind of intercept that function and kind of refactor a little bit so that we were only pulling the markers that we needed for each tour type based on a user preference that was saved in state. So if you think back to that kind of navigation component that Dana showed us, when you click on which type of tour you wanted, that click is registered and it's saved in state as user preference. And then we use that piece of state to feed to our function and say, okay, well, this person only wants to see the walking tour. And we know kind of on our end what list of markers we're going to need and what locations are a part of that walking tour. So we're able to kind of feed those locations and that small subset of markers into that function to then display the right tour. So those were kind of the big updates and the kind of big chunks or undertakings that we worked on over the past little while. And I'm excited to see kind of future implementations to see how that code is going to be used in the future with different tours. Yeah, I think that's all for me. If you want to take that away from me, Doug.
Sure, fantastic. And I just want to build on something that Haley mentioned, and that's that we were thinking ahead in the work on this application. We were thinking ahead to future implementations and trying to find ways to make it easier for future adopters of Pytheas. And I think we did that. And I did want to give just a little bit of kudos to Dana and Haley. I don't actually know if either of you have worked on an open source project before. But we were all feeling our way. This is the first open source project that Parallel 42 is hosting and sponsoring and sort of trying to move forward rather than just sort of throwing code into the commons. We're trying to actually enliven it and make it something that is real. And I think it was really important to have very sensitive and thoughtful developers on board so that those decisions could be made in the best way. I also want to perhaps encourage everyone who's listening to me right now to consider whether or not implementing Pytheas in your own universe or your own application is something that you would like to do, or if contributing to open source might be something that is worth your time. If you would like to be a part of Pytheas development, I'm here to tell you this is a great time to get involved. We are embarking on the process of now taking our wonderful code for that was specific to this tour and bringing it back upstream into the main Pytheas project, the main Pytheas repository. So that's our next step. And then from there, we're hoping that the community will get on board and help add some features. I've got a whole bunch of developers listening to my voice and potentially folks who are going to touch and implement Pytheas. Walter is super excited about this application and has 10,000 ideas for how it can be moved forward. So I'll just drop the idea that he gave me this morning, which was that what this app needs is a trivia game. A trivia game that is going to ask you content questions about the tour after you complete it. And I think that's a pretty good idea for certain applications of Pytheas. For example, more education-oriented applications of Pytheas might really benefit from some kind of a quiz being implemented in the application to support those educational goals. So all of that is my long-winded way of saying that if you want to get on board with Pytheas development, if you think it's something that could help your career or it's a way that you could contribute back to the community, you're looking at all the people who can help you on the screen. And I encourage you to take a look at the Parallel 42 Systems GitHub. The code is at this URL. It is github.com/p42systems/Pytheas-Windsor LGBTQ. Okay, and if you take a look at the code on that website, maybe you'll get inspired and want to make a contribution. And you can always reach out to us at info@p42systems.com. or to Hackforge by starting at the website hackf.org. And I'm sure that if you engage in any of those ways, you're gonna get a chance to work on Pytheas. Okay, we've all talked a lot. I want to open the floor now to questions. We have an in-person audience member who may have a question. We have a couple of people online. So is there anything anybody wants to know about Pytheas? Not to put you on the spot, but you are sitting right next to me.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna. I'm junior UX UI designer, and I was actually on the tour this Sunday. And I had like a couple of, I would say, like comments which potentially could improve user experience. So, like, I'm not familiar with React or Breastwork. I'm not like, and sorry for my English, is still learning, just moved to Canada. So I was wondering if there is like some like library of the components, or like was it tested before implemented? Like was it tested on users? Like did you have some sort of like wireframes to see the user flow before actually like put the product into production? So this was like my probably the first question.
Okay.
And some like minor comments, like would it be possible, let's say, to remove this back arrow on the continue button, because like usually this back button is facing backwards, whether like you are continuing forwards. So maybe just to remove this icon from the button at all would be beneficial, because like on the first glance it's sort of confusing.
That's great feedback.
Yeah, and to the other comment, I was wondering, would it be possible to add on the map the like feature when, let's say, when I'm scrolling and I want to see all the locations, I'm like I zoom out, and then especially using mobile phone, it was quite challenging to see where actually the bus is, or where am I, like to show like some flag, like show where I am, like show the location, like you have let's say in the Google Maps, like so. But it's more from my personal, like this feature should definitely be tested before like implemented, but again, it's my like personal. And also I was listening to the people around me, and they were asking each other, what is the next step? How did you figure out the next step? Because there were a lot of markers on the map, like all the possible locations, but we did not stop on each of them. Like it was, if I don't know if I'm making any sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So like, and also like the small part about the color contrasting on that purple section, where you have the purple background and the purple button, like this continue button. In terms of accessibility of the like color contrasting, I have doubts that probably people with visual impairments may have suffered, because I have doubts that those two colors are like accessible in terms of contrast. So probably that could be also like improved, maybe.
Okay.
So yeah, so
absolutely. This is
the start. I'm sorry, I just rambled way too much.
Not at all. This is great feedback. So the first, I'm going to defer to Dana and Haley if they want to take the question about the specific library of components that we used. Why don't we start there? If you guys want to touch on that, and then I got some other things I want to say.
Sure. Yeah. So I think. Sorry. So I think the question which you were throwing over to me, Doug, was about the components. What was? Sorry. Could you remind me of the exact questioning there?
Yeah, I believe you, Dana, mentioned that there was some components library which you used in the code. Yeah, if that's correct. So are they like?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know from the development side how the components look, but I work in the on the project right now. And firstly, before working on the project, we created this huge, I would say, design system with a huge component library, and then provided the developers with that components. And as long as we work on the product, this component library is being updated constantly and modified. So I was wondering if you have the same, because that's where my remark about this chevron button on the continue chevron icon on the continue button came from. If you had this library, component library, would it be possible to maybe see how audience react to this continue button without that icon?
I think, yeah, I understand the question now. Sorry. No. So yeah, what I would say about that is that we didn't actually use a components library. We used a JavaScript library that allowed us to write components, I think is perhaps how you misheard me there. But much of the work in terms of the actual design of the application and the way that one component moves to the next, I would have to actually defer again back to Doug on, because a lot of that, especially things like how buttons were designed, etc., were from the original Pytheas implementation. So Haley and I didn't have any part in wireframing those. But I think that that's really good feedback. And I think if we did have further time to work through more user testing, we would have come across perhaps some of those concerns. So really, thank you for bringing them to us now. I think while I have the microphone, though, I also wanted to touch upon the color contrast that you brought to our attention, because I did notice that. And I think, as I mentioned while we were demoing the app, the unfortunate thing, I think, partly of Haley and I working remotely on this app from outside of Windsor, was that a lot of the time that we spent in testing the app, the two of us, was not based within the bounds and therefore within some of these mapping components. So the way the app was structured had a theme which had certain colors being rendered in certain places throughout the application. And I think on that page, because I didn't have the opportunity, I think, to spend as much time in that part of the site as I would have liked, I didn't have as much awareness of how the color contrast was on that page versus some of the other pages. I think that's definitely something that we can look at addressing, because I care very deeply about color contrast and accessibility in some of those ways. But so thank you for bringing that to our attention as well. I think that that's definitely a fix that could be made. But yeah, if I could turn back over to you, Doug, just in terms of any wireframing that went through in the original implementation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and yeah, again, thanks for all the feedback. It's awesome. And Pytheas is open source, so you'll be glad to hear that you can fix it yourself. Just a little comedy. I'll stick with my day job though. So we, in the McDougall Corridor project, I mentioned all the partners that we were working with. We had a pretty significant community of folks that we were engaging with through the development of the application, which is a pretty heavy contrast to Pytheas, which was Basically, the people I mentioned at the top of this session and the folks you see on the screen, that was the universe of people who were engaged in dealing with Pytheas. But on McDougall, we took time to we did wireframe the components. We did engage a professional designer to work with us to style the application and to help us with some of those UI issues specifically. What I think is challenging sometimes, so we didn't have the same kind of budget or time frame for Queer Walk as we did for the McDougall corridor. So that means that we inherited a lot of the design decisions that were made on McDougall. And in fact, if you look carefully, you may notice that in the transition from map to view, we've still got the GIF from the McDougall tour is the loading GIF for Queer Walk, and it's, you might scratch your head a little bit and ask yourself, why is that different colors than the rest of the application, and why does it look like a street sign? Well, that's the reason. So there's definitely opportunities to work on fit and finish and polish, and I think that all kidding around aside about fixing it yourself, I think that one of the things that many open source projects suffer from is that we get the contribution of many programmers, fewer designers, and even fewer documentation writers, and that is a problem. And so open source projects often lag in terms of design quality and documentation quality. So somehow I'm managing to turn this into another call to action to contribute to open source. But yeah, so we did have a pretty big population of users out there testing on the street, testing the tour. And I think that Zhenya, the PM, who was the PM on both projects, I think she's walked that McDougall corridor more times than people who live there at this point, because she's done it so many times. We were really concerned with making sure the application worked well. And we did such, the work I think was so extensive and comprehensive on McDougall that I felt comfortable just taking this project on without doing a lot of that work. But the items that you mentioned, all those little details are things that we probably would have at least heard about if we had done more extensive testing up front. So great feedback, and I think maybe we learned a little bit about how open source projects sometimes progress. And is there any other questions? I see we've got Lucas and Riddick in the house. You guys have any questions?
So Doug, actually I missed the starting part. So I just heard you were Disa, and she was telling about some front end stuff or error or some stuff she was in. So I was having question is she was using React while dealing with components? Yeah. So we can use one library called Polished for contrast coloring purpose also. So we just have to install using npm or yarn. So means I have worked on one small project during my master's. So I remember I am not exactly sure can we help it, but Polished library we can use to face this to solve that issue. And for components 2-3 developer work on various components, so we can solve them to make much more color contrasting things, and we can use Git versioning also. So I was thinking that I just heard, I missed the starting part, and just correct me if I'm wrong something.
Okay, all right. I don't think that was a question. I think that was just some feedback. Am I right? Or was there a question?
Yeah. Was not sure.
Okay.
That's a great idea, though. It makes sense that there would be libraries that do the color contrast stuff automatically.
If possible, Riddick, could you just type the name of that library into the chat so folks who are interested can take a peek at it? That's awesome. Okay. Well, I think that we've probably exhausted the patience of everyone on the line tonight, but we definitely had a chance to do and we just had someone enter the waiting room. I am sorry, sir, you are late. but I'm really glad that you folks were here to help us, Dana, Haley, and I, and in spirit, Randy and Jenya, do just a little bit of a victory lap and celebrate what we achieved over the summer. Really, thank you, Riddick. Really appreciate everyone coming out. Again, what a fantastic project this was, and we'll see you next month at Border City Data. Good night, everybody. Take care.